All right, so with Sasha and I both traveling a lot over the last couple of weeks, it's been impossible for us to get together. So we thought we would re-release episode 36 where we interviewed Juliagrace. Juliagrace is an award-winning singer-songwriter. She actually sings for us on the show her song, Girl on the Kitchen Floor. This is a great session in the area of mental wellness and what we need to do to be kind to our mind. And Julia talks us through her own journey with mental health issues and the lessons that she's learned. I know you're going to love this session. Even if you've listened to it before, it is well worth a listen again. So let's get it. Hey there, you're listening to the Not So Breakfast Show with Sasha and Ish. All right, welcome to the Not So Breakfast Show today, another edition in our special interview series, and this week we are interviewing Juliagrace. Juliagrace is a speaker, singer-songwriter, amazing communicator, and today we're going to be exploring her journey with mental wellness. We love Julia's vulnerability in telling the story and also how she's used her experience to now be helping others. And as a real highlight, we also get to hear Julia sing one of her amazing songs. So that's the show. Let's get it. All right, welcome to the Not So Breakfast Show today, the one where we get to interview Juliagrace, and I'm excited about this because I have got to work with Julia a number of times, and when I say work with, I use that term loosely, I mean introduce a number of times. But anyway, before we get to Julia and I get to introduce her again, obviously I want to have a chat to my partner in crime. Sasha, how are you today?
I'm super good. I'm coming from Otatahi Christchurch today. And what I'm excited about is because I've never met Julia before, this is like proper journalism stuff. This is like, someone you've never met before and ask them questions. So I am really excited for today.
Yeah, and Julia's actually been someone I've done a little bit of work with as far as getting her to come and speak to some of our fitness managers. So she came to our fitness summit, which is our personal training managers for Les Mills, our group fitness managers for Les Mills, and they loved her. So we thought, well, let's level it up. And we got her to speak and present to our senior leadership team and our club managers at our offsite. And again, she absolutely nailed it. So I'll give you the introduction that you deserve, Julia, and then we can start into a little bit of the conversation. So Juliagrace is a TUI award-winning singer-songwriter. She's a teacher, she's a writer, she's a blogger, and she is a mental wellness advocate. She's passionate about her own journey with mental wellness, and she's so transparent with it that I always feel so connected, and I love the way that your message just washes over people. So very excited to have you on the podcast, Julia, so thank you for being here.
Well, a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Cool. So maybe we start with a little bit of your background.
Well, hang on. I just have a hard-hitting Julia's question to ask. Where were you last night?
Where was I last night? I was probably at home, lying in my bed.
No, were you? Were you there? Were you? Is this what you meant, Ish?
Netflix.
Oh, I tell you what, I was on the Netflix as well. And to be honest, Sasha would have been on the Netflix.
Oh, 100%.
I'll tell you a funny story. Since I've dealt with depression and anxiety, my concentration span has gone out the window, and I find that focusing on things is terrible. So I do watch Netflix, but I have a habit of watching and then playing on my phone. So I've got a solution, and it's watch things with subtitles because you can't look away. So I've been watching this show that's all in German, and it's a very complicated time travel. And if you look away for a second, they're all like, and I don't know what's going on, and I have to go back. So it's helping me to bring my brain back into focus.
That is perfect. And I've finished being an investigative journalist now, so back to you guys.
The subtitles thing is weird, though, because my daughter, she's 16 now, and she watches it with subtitles in English. So apparently that's a thing now, that the new generation.
Oh.
So you're just way ahead of yourself, although you're watching stuff in German, so you're like way ahead. But anyway, maybe back to that first question. Give us a little bit of your background and your journey.
Yeah, so background in music started really young. I started having piano lessons when I was 3. I used to go with my sister to this wonderful teacher, and I would just copy her. And so my parents thought, well, I might as well start paying. I don't know. And I started having piano lessons and getting into music and musical theatre and that sort of thing as I went through my teens, and became a singer-songwriter, was always a school teacher, communicator, storyteller. And then in my 40s, I discovered that I was dealing with a whole lot of mental health issues that were sort of on the rise. And so I put on my communicator hat, my teacher hat, my singer hat, my songwriter hat, and I sort of have morphed all of those things together just to create the presentations or the messages that I have today.
Yeah, and I think what does resonate so well with your messages and the fact that they are so real is people can relate to a lot of your journey, and they may not have gone to the extremes that you've been in and kind of worked through, and we could definitely explore that and some of the coping stuff that you've brought out of that with you. But there's certain things that you've done that I kind of go, oh, yeah, no, that resonates with me. Why do you think people connect to the story so much?
I think there's the personal story and then there's the universal experience. And when we tell our stories in an authentic way, we allow people to then use their universal experience and kind of overlay it on top of them. I liken it to listening to a song by someone like Adele, and you hear the song and suddenly in a moment, a bit of that song sounds a little bit like your story. And you're like, oh my gosh, Adele singing about me. It feels amazing because she is telling your story. And then you get to the bit that's not you and you're like, oh no, not that bit. No, not that part. But there's this moment in time where you realize that what you're going through, somebody else may have experienced something similar. And so I think there's something really cool when our experience resonates with the experience of someone that we're listening to. And I've found that when I'm honest about my own pain and my own journey and my own story, other people have the chance to kind of come alongside and kind of say, yeah, that's me as well. I've kind of been there. It might not be exactly the same, but it might have that same kind of global feeling about it. And I think it gives people permission to be honest about their own journey, the ups and the downs and all of it.
Yeah, because one of the things that I noticed that you said in one of the sessions that I was listening to is you said at the end of the day, everybody is basically on a bit of a spectrum with mental health, wellness, and you're either having great times or you may not be having great times. Whereas I think in previous conversations I've heard with people, and they talked about it being mental illness or it's an illness, but you really framed it up more in that mental wellness space, and that everybody has a journey with that.
Yeah, and I like to use the term mental wellness because what it does is it makes sure we are all mindful of our mental health. Because as soon as we say mental illness, those who have not had a diagnosed illness feel like, oh, well, that either A, that doesn't apply to me, so I don't need to worry about it, or B, oh my gosh, what I'm experiencing is not bad enough for me to have to address, so I'm going to just sort of tuck my way down in the I'm fine category. And I think by keeping it in that mental wellness sense, I just challenge people constantly. This is about all of us. If you've got a brain and you're breathing, that's a mental wellness issue. And sometimes it's great. I mean, mental wellness is lovely. We're sitting here today and we can see each other's faces on the screen and we're smiling and enjoying the journey. And that is a great mental wellness issue to have.
We'll be right back.
If there was one skill that could double your income, advance your career, and increase your ability to influence, it is the skill of presenting. Whether it's on stage, in the boardroom, or at a job interview, the 30-minute presenter program will help take you to the next level. So check out our Instagram page, click the link in the bio, and get started on the 30-minute presenter program. Because in that leadership space that Sasha and I tend to work in, a lot of the time leaders have this perception that they have to have it all together. You've got to be in control and you've got to be in charge and you've got to have emotional stability and know all the answers. But we know that is so often not the case. In fact, a lot of people in leadership or in creative lines or in anything like that, they have their own journey going on and they have times where they are questioning their own ability with stuff. So what are some of maybe the coping mechanisms that you would recommend that might be helpful for people?
Well, funnily enough, I don't want to follow someone who appears to have it all together because I have nothing in common with them. And I just have this gut feeling that they're either completely faking it, in which case something's, they got a lot to learn, or somehow they've found some key to the universe that I don't have and I can't relate. And so actually the funny thing is that vulnerability and honesty creates a sense of trust, because what you're saying to your team, rather than I've got it all together, you're saying I haven't got it all together, but these are the things that I've put in place to help me to do what I do. And probably my main message is that, we all deal with mental wellness issues, but we can still all lead beautiful, productive lives. Rather than we're going to get better and somehow this is all going to go away and then everything's going to be fine. I wake up every morning with mental illness issues of one kind or another. They might be large, they might be small, they might be almost non-existent, but I've got to get through the day. So as far as coping goes, I think rule number one is actually be honest about your journey. Pull down the guards. People aren't following you to be Superman. They're following you to be a real person.
It sounds to me as though a lot of the things that you're sharing about now, you've come to those through some experiences. Are there things that you can share about how you've come to this place of acceptance or of acknowledging that it's something you have to be conscious of every day? It's not something that's going to suddenly get better and those days are behind you now. What's happened for you along the way?
I think what's happened is that the pendulum has swung over the course of my life from sort of flourishing to languishing at times. So I've been, there've been times when I've felt great and life's been wonderful, and there've been times where I've found myself really, really almost manically working hard. And I look back now and I realise that while I looked very, very competent and highly functional at the time, I was probably in a bit of a manic phase. And then there have been times where I've really felt like I've had that big drop off, or I call it the deep dive. And I think looking back, I see the patterns, but over time I see the patterns under pressure becoming more up and more down. The highs have got higher and the lows have gotten lower. So some things that may have gone under the radar in the early days with the ups and downs became higher ups and higher downs. And I began to realize, and funnily enough, one of the things was that other people begin to notice, because we're really good at hiding, right? We're good at covering up and going, oh, everything's fine. When other people begin to notice your wobbly point, you know that something's there. And I think for me, it was actually realizing something was wrong and then deciding, do I give it all away, hide under a rock, forget it, get off the stage, close my mouth, or do I just keep talking about what is happening in my world today? And that's what I chose to do.
Because what was that kind of defining moment where you kind of went, I need to get some help with this?
So I call these the wobbly points, the moment at which you realize that if you continue to go on what you're doing, something's going to go, or something's going to blow. And ironically, it actually came from an external source, and in a way, possibly multiple external sources. People began to notice. But I sat down with an amazing friend of mine who's British, very cheeky man, much like my father, so I get on well with him. And normally with Kiwis, I would sit down and have those really surface conversations. Hi, how are you? Good. How are you? Good. And then that's it. And I sat down with this friend of mine and he looked me in the eye and he said, you don't look well. And I was so confronted. I just was really taken aback because I'm a Kiwi and we say things like, hi, how are you? Good. How are you? Good. I was like, dude. But he looked at me. He's had his own big mental wellness issues. And he just said across a coffee at a table in the middle of a cafe in Grafton, he said, you need to go to the doctor. And I've said to him many times since, I'm so glad that you're so rude. Because he just looked me in the eye and he didn't, as a friend, in some ways he looks up to me. He didn't look at me as, an artist or a TUI award winner or a singer-songwriter or a speaker or a mental health advocate. He looked at me human to human. He said, I see your need and I'm going to call it. And that was probably the beginning of realizing that the messages coming to me, they were seeing my wobbly point, even though I couldn't see it.
Mm. And it is a journey, isn't it? Because I think sometimes when we look at people who have been in a place where they've been struggling and now to a place where they have it under control. It's like, well, I did this and I did this and I did this and I did this and now I'm all better. But actually, it's like going 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Like it's definitely not linear, is it?
100% not. And in fact, Ish, you may recall last time I came and I spoke to your amazing team, I was just really transparent about the fact that this year I've had a deep dive. I had a big trigger point, some really challenging financial news that caused me to just go off the edge of the mental health cliff again. And it reminds me of a couple of things. First of all, that this is not a better or worse situation. This is not about being sick or well or about being, good or bad or dumb or smart. This is just a continuum of process like any other health issue. But secondly, was that the things that I teach and the things that I speak about work really, really well when taken in a cumulative dose. And so I was literally, in the last 2 months, I've been getting every tool out of my tool belt. I've been doing all the things. I've been doing, digging into my faith, my fitness, my whānau, my fullness, my food's changed, and, good pharmaceuticals, all these things, forward focus, have come into play. And they've reminded me that not one of them is the answer, but many of them together. I say get your antidepressants from as many sources as possible, possibly even the doctor, and just getting them into your world in a cumulative effect, and it really does help.
Listening to you, one of the things that strikes me is this paradox for mental wellness and self-acceptance is that, in my experience, some of the people that I care most deeply about are working really hard at being well. And so they are doing all of the things that they know they need to do. But paradoxically, that in and of itself becomes a form of striving. And that can lead to heightened states of anxiety where they build into their routine, I have to do this much yoga and this much good food and no coffee and no alcohol and no this and no that and no. And yet they also know the importance of letting go of all of the expectation. And so how do you balance that juggle between, particularly if your mental well-being is kind of affected by a pursuit of perfectionism or the idea that things have to be well?
I do. Great question. Because one thing feeds the other. And I like to say, anxiety is like depression's evil twin. It's like, hey, lie down and do nothing. But, here's my twin that'll keep you up all night and make you ruminate over all the things you've ever done and said to people. Yeah, I mean, it's a constant source of tension. And unfortunately, for people who are by nature perfectionists, giving them a list of things to do can actually cause more problems, because suddenly they've got that up on the wall and they're like, if I don't do all of these things, I'm going to feel worse. I think it's understanding, and one of the pieces of language I call these grabbable words, things that I like to grab for, is just the 1 degree of change and going for what my wonderful friend Richard Black calls ridiculously small steps. Is breaking stuff down and having a clear understanding of trying to do all of the things or the whole list or anything like that is going to also have its own level of stress. And I totally understand what you're saying, Sasha, because we can whip ourselves with the expectation that we have to do all these things to stay well. And the thing that I would say to that is that if your list of wellness tools is causing you anxiety, we need to revisit whether or not it's actually making you well. An hour of yoga because you absolutely have to is going to do less good than 5 minutes of standing on the grass in your bare feet breathing in the sunshine because you just want to and just have that fun and finding that joy in the stuff. So if you've got someone in your world who seems to be doing that, I think having that external voice, a lot of this is humility. It's actually going, I let my friend speak into my world and say, Julia, you're not great. And it was hard because I wanted to just tell everyone to stuff off and I know what I'm doing. But sometimes external voices can speak in. I like to say my life is like a long series of getting knocked off my high horse and getting back on progressively smaller horses. And right now I'm saddling up a chihuahua because the humility it takes to just go, I mean, even now in this moment, I answer your question and just to say, hey, I'm on the journey too. And if I was speaking to someone who was finding anxiety in their to-do list, I'd be like, let's cut it in half. Let's just try addressing one thing at a time. And let's not allow the wellness industry to become just another slave driver, money maker, patriarchal capitalist thing, or whatever you want to call it. Let's make sure it's simple. It's and it's cheap or free or reasonable in relation to my life.
I love that ridiculously small things idea. I know that when people get right to the end of themselves and they are right at the end of being able to keep going, the simple advice is you don't have to worry about tomorrow. That's not your responsibility. Your responsibility right now is one more breath, and then one more, and then one more. So I love that idea of taking the tiniest of steps towards a better, a rosier something,
How has your, I guess, your journey influenced your music? I mean, you're a creative artist, and, I always think of Taylor Swift and her albums that she brings out. So here we go, she's broken up with someone else. That using those life experiences and weaving them into what you do. How has that sort of influenced your style of music?
I think it's become very personal, and speaking about the times that are deeply personal and difficult has had a beautiful way of creating that universal experience for other people as well. And in some ways I've written new songs, but in other ways I've almost revisited some of the older songs that I wrote a song years ago called Beautiful Survivor. And I thought at the time I just had open heart surgery and I thought that was going to be my big thing, that was going to be the worst thing that happened to me. And neck run up, it all turned to custard. But I can revisit that and go, I was able to find strength in the darkest of times then, and then I have been able to find little moments of strength in the darkest of times now, and it's not over yet, and who knows what's around the corner for us and for me, and managing. I think there's something about being honest in your music, because it takes the melody and the lyric and the feeling and the heart, and it puts it into something beautiful. And I like to say songs are like a package. I can give someone a gift, but a song they can unwrap over and over and over again. Other people's songs have been the soundtrack to my healing over my life, from maybe heartbreak or depression, or they've sort of just played in the background of what's gone on in my world. And when I hear that a song of mine has been like that to someone else, that's like the highest form of compliment.
Okay, so what's the worst breakup song that you've ever had a flatmate play on repeat? I can think of two instances. When I was at university, someone I know played Everybody Hurts for about 4 weeks non-stop, and we just used to yell. We used to go, okay, we know you're hurting, but now we're all hurting too. That's enough. But my parents tell me that when I broke up with one of my boyfriends when I was like 15 or 16, I taught myself to play on the piano Michael Bolton's How Am I Supposed to Live Without You? And apparently that was pretty hard going for my family. I used to come home from school and just start the chords, and Mum and Dad would be like, oh, Sash, come on. I don't know, are there any classics like that you guys can think of?
Oh, I remember. How am I going to breathe without you? I think might have been a Tony Braxton. How I breathe. And actually, it's funny because I look back at these songs and how am I supposed to live without you? How will I breathe without you? And it's funny because as an adult, when you do go through heartbreak and you realize that actually some of those overstatements have really impacted us, because we actually do feel like if this happens, I will die. And you won't. but you don't feel like that in the day. I do have a funny story about the Everybody Hurts, actually, which is not a breakup story, but it just reminded me of this. A few years ago, I was in Ohakuni with a friend of mine, and she was staying in a yurt. So, those little outside houses. And she said, come to the yurt. We're going to have a party. You're welcome. Just come in and, come in anytime. Anyway, so I turned up at the yurt. I went third yurt from the right. And as we came up the drive, I thought, I've got a great idea. This is going to be hilarious, So I bowled up to this yurt. I flung open the front door and I went, everybody hurts. And then I looked around in the room and I said, you're not Meredith. It was the wrong yurt. So they all looked at me really weird. I backed out, shut the door quietly, went to the next yurt and tried to do it again. That reminds me of everybody. That just goes that creative ideas don't always work out how you think they're going to.
A risk worth taking.
I actually wrote an amazing heartbreak song. I think it was a risk worth taking. It would have been great had I got the right yurt.
Yeah, so tell us about this heartbreak song.
So I had my heart broken by an Anglican vicar, which sounds like the beginning of a bad joke, but it's actually a true story. And we were heading to Bali the next day for an all-expenses-paid holiday. Lucky he wasn't invited. So a friend of mine and I went to Bali, and I basically cried for 2 solid weeks. I cried into my cocktails. I cried into the salad. I cried into the pool. I cried around the pool. I was the pool. And during that time, I wrote this incredible song called Hotels and Heartache. And even now when I sing it, there's this absolute juxtaposition where I go, the song is so heartbreaking, but it's such a good song. Yeah. And I think when you go through pain as an artist, there's this little voice on your shoulder going, this is going to make a great song. Or this will be a really good workshop topic, and I'm, oh, shut up, but that someday it's going to come back to help you out.
We should explain for anyone who's listening who doesn't understand the kind of vagaries of Christian faith, that Anglicans can get married. So it's not like Catholics who aren't allowed to fall in love. Anglican vicars can fall in love and be in love and get married. So on that basis alone, I hate him. He should never have done that to you.
It's good to clear that up, though.
Yes, this wasn't some weird Catholic priest thing. Yeah, not that they're weird, but you know what I mean. Yeah. Good call. Good call.
Right, so one of the songs that you have sung at both the offsites that I've been to, and actually at a couple of other presentations I've seen you do, is Girl on the Kitchen Floor. Yeah. And there's something about that song, I don't know, it gets me every time. I think I always have to stand up afterwards and say, thank you, Julia, and kind of wipe my tears away. But maybe tell us a little bit about that song, why you wrote it, and kind of what it means.
Yeah. So just so you know, my aim going into that session is make Ish cry, and I can then tick it off my to-do list.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. Oh, gosh. I just think there's these moments in time where we feel like there's nothing ahead. We feel like there's nothing left to live for, and there's no hope for the future. And in those moments, that feeling is very, very real. And I think when we're dealing with depression and anxiety, it's amplified so many times because we're not just normal, healthy brain people having a rough day. We're also fighting our central nervous system, which is in fight or flight mode. We're dealing with, maybe really low serotonin levels. We're dealing with catastrophizing, where we just quite naturally think it's all over, it's the end of the world. And in those moments, having the ability to cut through the noise, cut through the dark, cut through the mania, and actually give a message of your life is not in danger. This will pass, is just incredibly powerful. And I guess my motivation for that song was, if I could talk to that girl on the kitchen floor, what would I say from now, from 8 years on? And in some ways, there've been times when I'd say, your life's going to be amazing. It's going to be beautiful and perfect. And then other ways I'd say, hey, you know what? In some ways it's going to be just as hard, but you will survive. And in some ways it's just going to be totally different, and you'll hardly recognize the future that you have. So my heart for that song is that if there's anybody who needs something to cut through the noise, there's something about the melody that transcends our logical brain. There's something about music that can just cut through the logic and cut through all the, the things of what about this and what about that? And just in those moments, it can just speak deeply to the heart.
All right, well, let's have a listen to that song now.
This song is for the girl on the kitchen floor. I'm so grateful that I'm not her anymore, but I never will forget how she cried there on the concrete every night. This song is for the girl who had given up hope, who had watched her dreams and promises go up in smoke as she faced the bitter knowledge there was no more comfort in sight. I wanna tell that girl that life will be beautiful again. I wanna tell that girl that her days will be full of love again. And I've got miles and miles to go, but in my heart of hearts I know there is so much left to live for. Girl on the kitchen floor. This song is for the girl with a tear-stained face who, in the face of tragedy, hung on to her faith like a lifeline in the tempest was all she had the energy to do. This song is for the heart who was shattered and torn, who are living in the darkest hour just before the dawn. Hold on, better days are coming. I wanna tell that girl that life will be beautiful again. I wanna tell that girl that her days will be full of love again. And I've got miles and miles to go, but in my heart of hearts I know there is so much left to live for. Girl on the kitchen floor.
I've heard it I don't know how many times now. It gets me every time. There's something about it, but there is something about that, like you said, that healing thing that music does, and that emotion that it brings, and it allows you to feel those emotions. And feeling emotions isn't bad. I think sometimes we go, well, I don't want to feel that, so I'm just not going to. Yeah. But I remember something you said, it's better to be, feeling emotions and kind of letting little bits of emotion out every day than holding it all up inside and then suddenly it's like a massive volcano. I think you said it was better to be a geyser and blowing off once a day than being a volcano and all of a sudden all this devastation out that happens because it's all been held up.
Yeah, letting it out safely. That's with that grabbable language of make a big scene and carry on, is being able to go, I'm going to let it out in a safe, acceptable environment, and then we're going to continue. I'm going to express myself, my frustration. I'm going to take it out on the punching bag, a literal punching bag, not a person, but, I'm going to take it out in a way that's just going to make me feel like, I'm letting this out in a good way, and then I'm going to carry on. Because in the end, I don't want to do things that are going to cause harm to myself or to others.
So if people are interested in getting in touch with you as a corporate speaker, because you are a great corporate speaker and we've used you a number of times, and Les Mills is particularly choosy about who they get in on stage, but again, they loved it. So if people are wanting to approach you for corporate speaking, what would be the best way to do that?
So jumping onto my social media is a great way to get a taster for what I do. So Juliagrace NZ on Facebook or Instagram. It's a good way just to kind of see what's how people are relating and communicating into that world. Juliagrace.co.nz is a great place to jump on my website and to get into booking. But I have just found that doors are beginning to open into being able to share the honest story, but also some good resources. I feel like we've done a lot of work in destigmatizing. Particularly with young people, they're happy to admit that they're dealing with maybe depression or anxiety, but we've got a long way to go in what to do next. Now what? Now that I've admitted that I have a problem, what do I actually do? And the grabbable language that I've referred to, which is what I use in my Be Kind to Your Mind presentations, my heart for that is that on the days that I'm feeling okay, I learn the words. When I'm not okay, I can just grab them. I can just grab that language. I can say, Ish, I'm in at work today. I'm a bit wobbly, not feeling that great. Or, hey, I need to let something out. I need to just make a big scene and carry on. Don't panic. It's not the end of the world, but I'm going to talk to you about that. Or, hey, team, what can we do? What could our one degree of change be this week? Just in moving us towards those areas of well-being. And so providing people with good language is really a high motivator for me. And my dream is that those grabbable words are on people's fridges all around New Zealand and beyond, so that families can grab them and communicate to each other in a fun, positive, memorable way about their mental health. Because when we're under pressure, we don't have good ideas. And we need to be able to grab for something. Yeah.
And, as a leader and a manager in the business I'm in, it is half of the conversation is just getting the conversation started and having some resources and getting in people like yourself to talk, because we've gone through such a crazy 2020. So going into 2021, you feel depleted and energy levels are low. And so mental wellness is a relevant topic and something that we should be talking about. We should have been talking about it, for a long time, but it's suddenly become, like you said, a little bit more normal. So you don't have to have all the answers. Right. Just being able to start the conversations or being able to initiate conversations through people like yourself is just such a great way to, bring it out in the workplace and say that it is okay to not be okay.
And I'll encourage you with just a little story that doesn't matter where or when you are in the process or even geographically where you are, we can still share our story in a powerful way. So during this real recent deep dive, I was having an absolute shocker and really struggling. And I went to the supermarket one day and I walked into New World and they had this beautiful deli section of all these salads. And I looked at the salads, and one of the things that I find is when I'm feeling quite high levels of depression, I struggle to make decisions. Small decisions become almost insurmountable. So I stood there at the deli counter and I'm choosing and I couldn't choose, and I was like, all over the place. Plus we'd had that financial news, so I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I can't be spending money, so the added pressure. And I hummed and I hard, and the girl was so nice to me, and in the end I just said, look, I'm sorry, I'm just going to walk away. And she looked at me quite strangely, and I went away and I found some nice yogurt reduced for a quick sale. Boom. Nailed it. And as I walked back past her, I thought, you know what, I'm going to say something to this girl. And I just stopped her and I said, hey, excuse me, sorry to bother you. I said, just before I was really confused making those decisions. And I said, I'm really dealing with depression at the moment. And one of the symptoms is struggling to make decisions, even on small things. And I said, you were really kind to me. You were really nice. You were really polite. And I so appreciate that. And she was like, oh my gosh, I totally understand. I sometimes feel that way too. And it was this beautiful moment in the Delhi of New World, no stage, no palaver, no trumpets and whatever. But just a way that I thought I can help her better understand mental health just by telling her what's going on in my brain right now.
All right, so that's the Not So Breakfast show today. Thank you, Julia, for speaking to us and taking the time and for sharing that song. It is such an amazing song and speaks in so many ways, so thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Cool. And Sashi, where are you rushing off to? You're going to be rushing off and doing something next little while?
I'm rushing off to be hyper anxious about all the things on my list. No, I'm not. I really appreciate this reminder because I am one of those people who have been blessed with mental wellness. And I love that distinction you make about this is for everybody to be thinking. We're all on a kind of a spectrum and a range, and nobody's magnificent all the time. If you've got a brain and you breathe, these things are important to be mindful of. And thank you for your time with us and for the reminder and for the wonderful example that you give us of that honesty and vulnerability that as leaders we can lead from a place of authenticity and vulnerability. It's not about being full of our own greatness. It's really about being true to who we are and holding that example up. So thank you for all that you do for so many in that space.
You're so welcome.
If there was one skill that could double your income, advance your career, and increase your ability to influence, it is the skill of presenting. Whether it's on stage, in the boardroom, or at a job interview, the 30-Minute Presenter program will help take you to the next level. So check out our Instagram page, click the link in the bio, and get started on the 30-Minute Presenter program.